me. I don't do any of the real work these days. What? Who was aimed with?
I think you're just standing around with Jane rapping about games.
As I do.
Pat, you didn't go this year, did you?
I didn't, and it was basically irrelevant to me, oddly, and I think that's really what I wanted to talk about a little bit, was whether or not it is still actually relevant to us, how relevant it still is, and is it becoming increasingly less relevant? Because the simple fact of the matter was, I didn't need to be there.
I think I can appreciate that. I think my opinion changed throughout the week, where initially after a day of press conferences on the Monday, I was really put out, really disappointed with a lot of the games that were on show, sort of getting a headache from all of the sort of loudness and the violence. But then when you actually went out and played some of the games, I had a really good time with Need for Speed. I know it's not really that sort of sexy to say so. It's not that, a game that's sort of featuring on any game show list, I don't think. But I had a lot of fun with Need for Speed, playing some of the Wii U stuff that I really enjoyed, Rayman and Project P100. There were actually some good games on show. I just think overall, watching it from afar, you might come away with the impression that all the journalists that were there hated it and really jaded. I don't know if that was completely the case.
I would agree with that. I think there's 2 points. One is that, as Guy said, it was kind of a show of two halves. Once you saw the conferences, they veered between disappointing and badly sort of ordered in terms of what was shown and for how long, to utter shambles, and I'll let you guess which one I thought that was, to when you actually got out on the floor and saw the stuff there. What's really clear is, it's the sunset for this generation. The stuff's really mature. These are games and formats and ideas that are pretty well worn, but there were some really nice and fun executions of that stuff. So if you went in there not expecting much more than that, I think you would come away pretty pleased. But the other thing was, which I bored people out there senseless with, is that I think E3 as an idea is stupid and semi-finished, and there were like 45,000 people there by all accounts, and if you even like conservatively imagine that half of them are press, all writing pretty much the similar stuff about the same things, it doesn't make any sense to me. And you've got people with Steam and XBL and PSN, increasingly stuff delivered through that. Like last year, the whole Bioshock Infinite presentation went up, right? So you can fly to America and stand in a line and sit in a dark box and watch that, or you can watch it at home. And I think the role of the media is still to curate content and pass what's good and what's exciting. But if I was a format holder or a developer, I would be doing everything I could to beam that stuff directly to people where they live. Why wouldn't you? But the flip side, that when people were arguing with me about that, was they were saying, well, games still needs to have something collective that's a celebration, so everyone talks about games for a week. And I think there's some truth in that, but the notion that it's done the way it's currently done is an archaic hangover from how the press used to work.
It is, yeah, and I really think as a format that if they continue to drive forward with the show as it is, I think they'll run into exactly the same issues that they ran into in 2006. The problem with it is that the biggest problem I can see is that it's basically become, because they're not really honest about the fact that it's essentially a consumer show, that it means it doesn't really work for anyone that's there. Like it doesn't. The big problem they'll run into is when it doesn't really work for the people that are exhibiting, and that's exactly what happened last time. It's like EA just threw all their toys out of the pram and said, "This is pointless for us anymore. We can't do any work. Like the press that are coming to see us can't do any work. Like our stand is just crowded with kids, which is fine in a way, but because the show is not set up to be a consumer show, it doesn't really work for them either."
But why would you announce anything there anyway? Like you looked at, I think it was Square had big announcements before the show even started. Konami did, which they all did at their own events. They put out trailers, and that stuff was fine. But you can see they're running away from E3 because you get no cut through at all, right? And we had just for CBG, so we had 4 journalists on the ground there. We had plenty back in the UK doing stuff as well. But when you're out there on the ground, it's you can spend all day at the show, and if you're lucky, get a couple of decent pieces up in the evening. It's not cost effective, I don't think.
No, this year, I didn't send any of our team because it is basically they're far more efficient and far more worthwhile sat at home on their computers on a really fast internet connection. Because I've got freelancers from California. I've got 3 or 4 guys. They can just go to the show. They haven't got jet lag. They can go home and do the work, and everything just happens in a far more ordered fashion.
But the problem is, and this is what I've argued with people here, and maybe we end up talking too much about the media rather than the games, but you can then, in a way, the risk then is you perpetuate that sort of journalism cycle where everyone's just reporting off some things they've seen and it becomes complete Chinese whispers. And Guy, I don't know if you agree, but when you're at the show, I saw some stuff behind the closed doors and in presentations which I just wouldn't have picked up on if I was trying to do it remotely. Or you know, Dan Dawkins spoke to Kojima, and Kojima was telling him stuff about The Last of Us that he just couldn't have got remotely. You know, so there's an element of there's always going to be material you'd only have got from being on the ground, but how valuable is that material both to the readers and to us? That's what I guess you can debate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with The Last of Us and beyond, there were extended demos shown beyond what was shown at the press conferences. They only really elaborate on stuff. Like The Last of Us, it was a slightly different playthrough than what you saw at the Sony press conference. But I believe, and I haven't verified this, I heard this at the show, that the Beyond demo that I saw behind closed doors was leaked ahead of the embargo anyway. So again, it kind of defeats the purpose of actually being there and hearing David Cage talk about it, as nice as that is.
Yeah, well, you would definitely go to press conferences and then a day later see the exact same thing played. They go, oh, we're going to play it slightly differently, and they'd kill like Dude B instead of killing Dude A, and you go like, yeah, that was definitely worth that transatlantic flight.
Well, this is all I was sending our guys to do, because like we see it in the press conferences, and then we'd have the appointment set up for like the following day, and they were saying to me, you know, it's like, Pat, I'm going to see the same thing, and I just like, well, you know, throw in a quote and give me your take on it. Do you know what I mean? And I'll give you a bit of money. You know, it's becoming just. I mean, it's like I can't ignore it, but I wish I could, because like it's showing me stuff that's shown to, you know, thousands of other people, including consumers. So like, why am I rehashing something that they've already seen? Like this is the exactly the problem that we have at the press conferences as well. Like, I didn't even have people in the press conference live blogging this year, and like we're a news site. Like why do I need to do it when I can sit like watching it live instead of like struggling with a 3G connection in some, you know, hall in the middle of nowhere?
If I was like a software publisher, certainly if I was one that wanted to be bold, I would go much more radical. With those demos that are created just for E3 and for those 45,000 people to see, I'd put them out across PSN and XBL with a self-destruct code, so they only last like 2 days or whatever. So you've got 2 or 3 days to play this game. They're so polished anyway, those vertical slice demos. They're often like, you play them in the final game and they're identical to what you saw a year before. That's how I'd do it, and I'd have like an online festival personally where for a week everyone came together and played this cool new stuff and talked about it. Doing myself out of a job here, aren't I?
An online festival. I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Loosen your belts, chaps.
I want to pick up on a couple of points. One that you said, Tim, where, you know, like everything's been, you know, unveiled, and this is, I think Eurogamer wrote about this morning, so this is paraphrasing them slightly. You know, everything's been revealed before the event. Everyone knows what's coming up. So with Sony, we knew there was a new David Cage game coming out, and with EA, we knew about Dead Space and Need for Speed and all that sort of stuff. But the one publisher that made the splash was Ubisoft, because they had some genuine surprises there. So it was still, you know, it is still possible to make a big splash at E3, and I think Ubisoft showed that. I'd say that they were the only one that really showed that. And then with your point, Pat, about reporting on all this stuff, you're right. It's why fight over a dodgy 3G connection or an even worse Wi-Fi connection at these press conferences when you can see it all streamed live? I guess, where does that leave live bloggers such as yourself or us that, you know, Gamespot, we live blog on it as well? I guess we add some element of humour to it, or some insight, hopefully. I don't know. It's an interesting one.
But
I think expensive, right, to deliver a few gags.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is though that the entire concept of live blogging, when it's in a situation that's that well covered, it's a bit like the sort of Mac keynotes. You know, that you have like 100 live blogs. So you just find one which you like and which works. You find whoever's got like a reliable connection, and you just stick with them. But I mean, even that is like is just completely diluted by the fact that I could have watched like any of those press conferences on about 5 live streams.
Although weirdly, didn't Apple for WWDC this year not live stream it for the first time?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the logic is. I've always wondered that with live blogs. I mean, I read football stuff, and I'll sometimes go back and read the live blog of a match I've watched to see what the live blogger said about it. But I guess it's pretty niche. But going back to what you said, Guy, about Ubisoft, to me, one of the things that really stuck out with that was just how desperate people are for new IP.
Yeah.
Like the existing franchises, as polished and as well, I say exciting loosely, as slick as they looked, I think people were crying out to see something new. As soon as and that was where Nintendo really fell over. Like, where's the new IP beyond Nintendo Land coming? I'm such a nerd for Pikmin. I was really pleased to see it back, but you just wonder what their internal studios are doing, because it ain't making 3DS games, is it? Like, what are they making?
I think that really showed up like one of the biggest flaws of the show this year, is that it has failed categorically to encompass anything like in the industry apart from AAA. And like obviously as we move towards the end of the cycle, like the whole sort of AAA portfolio is shrinking, and so everyone just like laser focuses in on this like increasingly smaller group of video games. And because the budgets of those games are going up, they're becoming more risk averse. So everything just looks the same. And it looks like there's just no variety there. And that's a proper failure of the show. So I think it's very telling that they can wheel out another game with a guy who hides behind the car and shoots someone in the face. And everyone just goes, this is brilliant, you know what I mean? And it's just like, I've seen this game like 50 times.
He did have that little stick. That little stick with me, the baton. But yeah, I said the same sort of thing. I saw so many that it's either a first-person shooter or a third-person action game. All that AAA stuff either goes in one of those two pots. And especially with the third-person stuff, they're becoming such a smush of features where they're just borrowing from each other that it becomes this weird base of like you say, cover-based stealth, horrible melee kills. Like they're all nicking. Because, like you say, the budgets are so high, you can't afford to fuck up if you're the guy greenlighting this stuff, right? I mean, the Star Wars game, for instance, if you want to look at, you know, what sniff of the next-gen gusset there was there, it was in a game like Star Wars, and it's Uncharted in space, right? So it's better graphics, like you know you're going to get that, but what else are you going to get? I would suggest probably nothing.
No.
Like, you will get fancy takes on these existing and well-trodden templates.
But I mean,
video games.
Well, this is the thing, right? You know, we're also, I mean, this has been said quite a lot in the last week. I mean, we're not the only people that have picked up on the fact that, you know, a lot of those games were phenomenally violent. And, you know, is this what video games have become? Is essentially like a man or a woman killing men or women in mentally horrible ways.
But it's always been a fundamental problem, isn't it, of the medium, is that it's incredibly hard to model complex human behaviour. What's easy to do is have a stick that sends a signal to something else to die, or to have an accelerator pedal. People got bored of driving games. I could tell you exactly where I think this has come from, and I won't claim this as my own because someone else pointed it out to me, but I forget who, so I will nick it. Is if you go back to like Modern Warfare 1, right, it was the first FPS to really do those unbelievably savage, hunting knives through the fucking sternum, pardon me for swearing, melee kills, and Modern Warfare then, you know, busted all the blocks, so just everyone as a base level went, we've got to have that level of violence, that's what people want. It's just tunnel vision going, that's what's cool.
Mm. But I mean, do you think there's an element of us as the press like laser focusing on those games? Because like it's not just. I was talking to Nathan Grayson about this last night. Like he was one of my freelancers at the show, and you know I was spilling all this shit out to him, and he was just like, to be honest, Pat, like the games that were there were actually very strong, and like there was a lot of like stuff there that he was excited about. Like he was talking about like the Indiecade stuff, and I'm just like. I'm sure he's right. You know, I'm sure a lot of those games, you know, I'm sure there was plenty of variety there. It's just that we just like, I mean, GameSpot, VG247, CVG, I mean, you could put a list. I could hold up my fingers now and say which games we were most interested in at that show. Right? I'm sure when we all sat down and did our planning, we all had our hit list, right?
Yeah.
You know, and like, surely isn't it our fault that we're not broadening our content?
No, I don't think so, actually. Sorry, Guy, you go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was just going to say I'm always interested in how the mainstream covers this stuff, so I make a point of checking out the BBC and a few of the newspapers to see what they're writing about. And the Metro seem to be covering it fairly comprehensively, but the stories on the BBC weren't of any of the games that we've talked about so far. They were about the Smart Glass stuff from Microsoft. They were the J.K. Rowling hookup with Wonderbook at PlayStation. These were the big stories. I think sometimes that the media can get a bit wrapped up in it, and I don't know if I wouldn't say you guys are guilty of this, but you know, with GameSpot, you know, the big games for GameSpot are The Last of Us, they are Beyond, they are Gears of War, they are Halo. But I think, you know, a lot of people who are not maybe playing 20 games a year or whatever we play are quite happy with playing The Last of Us and then maybe playing Journey, and they're not as they're not seeing as much of the violent games as maybe we are as journalists.
We're the ones, I think, we're the ones who, I think we're incredibly jaded with a lot of that stuff. So when a Journey or something does come along, I think you look at the amount of op-eds that were written about Journey, people are hungry to write about that sort of stuff, but they're just not, there's just a failure, I think, to greenlight and deliver it. You look at something like The Last Guardian, where was that, Where was Nintendo's new IP? Because I think people would have written reams and reams of copy about it. I think the press is sometimes too eager to beat itself up and blame itself for everything. It's far more the economic side. I'd love to think we were that influential, but I don't think we are. It's far more the economic side of it. And there's, like you said, Guy, there's people that play other stuff. There's also a huge chunk of the mainstream who will buy FIFA and Call of Duty each year and won't buy anything else. And,
we certainly have readers on the site, which, I've got one guy who plays one game ever. And it's Call of Duty, and he doesn't play anything else. You know what I mean? And that's I can't believe that those people exist, but it's true. It is absolutely
Actually,
true.
on that level, I had a lot of fun playing this year's FIFA. That was one of the nice moments where I just managed to just take 5 minutes out and play this year's FIFA. It's not, like I said, not going to make our Game of the Year list, but it's still a lot of fun. And I don't know about Call of Duty. I made a point of going to see Call of Duty, even though I wasn't writing about it, just because it's that game. And it looked, I thought it looked okay. I think we're all beyond it at this stage, but it looked okay as far as Call of Duty goes.
I think the biggest disappointment for me was that it was just so predictable. It was just, even the Nintendo thing, you just knew what was coming. When he came out with Pikmin, it was just like, please God, you know what I mean? Here it is. And then,
that was the high point. It went downhill from there. I thought Pikmin was good.
No,
5 minutes into that show, I thought they were going to be fine, and then it just went.
But I think that was what really let the show down this year, is the fact that Nintendo was just so weak. Because if they had really, as if they were ever going to really nail it, do you know what I mean? I think that they're just. I said this during the show. I think they now have to appeal to the core and the casual, and trying to cram all of that stuff into the broken disaster that is E3 press conferences. It showed how knackered it is, because they had to have 2 press conferences outside of their press conference.
But there's that weird brutality to the way you program it, because I think if they'd have finished on a new 3D Mario game or a new Zelda, despite the kind of tepidness of what had gone in the middle of the section, people would have walked out into the sunshine going, "Oh, Nintendo had a great show, what a fabulous, oh, Mario's back, and fabulous." But if you don't have something like that, you walk away. One friend of mine said to one of the guys on Nintendo Mags, "You're watching a company commit suicide in slow motion on the stage right now." As tears rolled down his face. But I've never been to a Nintendo conference where there was less weeping. I thought it was incredible. And yet the people who played the stuff on the show floor say it's a cool bit of kit, and Nintendo Land's more fun than it seemed from the demo. And
that's what I mean. The format is broken. You know what I mean? If they can't, that is a really, really obviously not lovely piece of hardware. It's got some great ideas. I think they're going to suffer from exactly the same problems which they've had for the last 2 generations, in that there's going to be a lack of software. But the stuff that makes it work is going to really sing. But how can they said it themselves about 100 times. It's just we can't show you this. It's just well, okay, well then why?
But you've also come away from it not knowing when it's out, not knowing how much it will cost, not knowing what's likely to be available day one. You don't really know much more than you knew last year, as far as I can tell.
But that goes back to your previous point, where they don't really need to. They're going to do an event, I'm sure, in between now and launch, like they did with the 3DS, where it'd be in Amsterdam or wherever it is, for the press and retailers to go out, experience more of the games, and announce the release date and price and all the rest of it. But again, there's an event happening here in London right now, where you can play Wii U. So again, the fact that playing it out in LA is kind of redundant. But I think once you play some of those games, I don't know if you had a chance to play them, or if you have either, Pat. Some of them were really they showed very well what the Wii U is good at. I think Project P100 and Scribblenauts Unlimited and Rayman Legends were really, really convincing uses of the touchscreen.
But good luck putting asymmetric multiplayer on your TV ad. That's not going to shift you any units. All they've achieved, really, they put on a really expensive show for the privilege of taking a hammer to their share price. If they hadn't have had that show at all, I imagine their share price would not have shed whatever percent it was over the subsequent 3 days. Like we were saying earlier, it seems like a cracker's thing to do, really. And you see more of the third parties not bothering.
I don't think they're that stupid. Do you know what I mean? I think there'll come a point where probably really soon, like when one of them will just turn around and says, actually, no. You know what I mean? I mean, it happened in Japan, like for Tokyo Game Show, and Nintendo. Did they? Oh no, they did go last year, but it's not a given that they turn up and have a massive press conference there. It's
they killed Space World as well, didn't they? It used to be Space World was twice a year, wasn't it?
Yeah. But like, I don't know. I mean, it looks like they might have to move it next year. Is that the case?
Well, there's the talk, isn't there, of the LACC is being rebuilt or used for something else. They're going to move it to either...
like going to CES and seeing like the Microsoft keynotes at CES, it's just perfect. Like you wouldn't have to go like halfway over town to go to the Microsoft conference and then all the way back to the Sony one. And
yeah, it's idiotic. You're doing $40 cabs all the time. Like. Yeah. Yeah.
Like to have it all under one roof, which just makes so much sense. And like obviously there's all of the hotels in very close proximity, and
also Pat wants to play some roulette.
Exactly. A bit of poker, which is fun.
Dead girls in the bathtub's much easier to pass off in Las Vegas. I imagine everyone watching this is going to be really enjoying all these people moaning about having to go to America to see video games.
It seemed as though like there was a genuine excitement, just watching on Twitter from non-game journalist types about Watch Dogs. Though it seemed like that really did sort of get E3 out there to the people that use Twitter. So I would say not mainstream, but still into kind of the geek culture, so to speak.
I've come away from E3 actually feeling fairly chipper about it. I've definitely been to much worse shows, like the Trestle Table year, which is the year after they all decamped from the convention centre and had it round about Santa Monica. That was awful. The year after was awful. At the same time, I came away thinking I'd spent 3 days and seen nothing good. There were plenty of games there that I thought I will enjoy playing this. It's fun. Like stuff like SimCity. Like again, they're not reinventions, but they're really, really tidy, mature, clever games that people will really like. I'm more curious as to how the generational stuff plays up, because going back to what we were saying about Nintendo, I just don't see what happens next summer when you have to assume the other formats will then be in pretty much full swing. What happens to third parties for Nintendo then? If they can't sign them up now, which they don't seem to have done, they've got pretty much the same list of third parties. If they can't sign them up now, how are they going to attract them next year, right? It doesn't make any sense at all to me. It will be exacerbated over the previous 2 generations.
There's quite a bit about Wii U that doesn't make any sense, to be honest. I think but then I say this every time Nintendo just baffles me. Yeah. And then they sell like 500 billion trillion units, and the one thing that it really is confusing me about Wii U though is the lack of a sort of coherent online strategy for it. Yeah. I just how they can possibly stand up realistically to things like PSN and Xbox Live with that machine is just.
But does it have a hard drive? Well, I was discussing it earlier.
It's got some flash memory.
It's got flash memory, isn't it?
It's not just Nintendo though. It's Sony with the Vita. They had a real chance to knock it out of the park with just a clip or something from Call of Duty for Vita or Assassin's Creed, and they just didn't have either of them.
Yeah, that was really shocking.
They're not shouting at those publishers to say...
With the Black Ops Vita game, they said, this is the first time there's been a first-person shooter of this quality on the Vita. And I imagine the guys who made Resistance were sobbing into their own laps. It's in the shops right now. We're right here. No, never mind.
No, I don't know. I thought it was a really weird show. I'm not as down on it as I was at the end of the week. At the end of the week, I was just like, fucking video games is dead. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But then... the more I think about it, the more I realise it wasn't actually that bad, and the fact that it's a transition year really exacerbated the sort of sameness of AAA. But they have to do something about the format and the general variety. I think they have to be really honest about the fact that it has to be a consumer event as well as a trade event. Unless they make it really relevant to the trade. By allowing the media to do work, by providing proper facilities for them, by making sure that they can get to the pods properly, that they can get to their interviews and get proper access to everything, then I will stop. I will carry on not going because I just don't need to be there. I mean, I think a really good example of how it can properly work is Gamescom, because it's just such a massive event. and that's fine because like all the consumers go there to see the games and they can. But then we can do all of our work in the other bit.
Yeah.
Why is that so difficult? Like I don't know why it's so hard for this to happen. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of like pressure in the US from the publishers on ESTA or something to not make it a consumer event because it might mean that they'd have to step up and spend like loads more money. I don't know.
I think they're just so used to doing it the way they've always done it. It's like anything that becomes a behemoth of that size. It's incredibly hard to enact any sort of change. I think I say that I've always worked for companies that are quite big. Like it's tough changing stuff.
I don't know where it's going to leave Gamescom in the calendar as well. I mean, we've got to start planning for that now.
Gamescom's too soon, isn't it? Don't you think? It's too soon in the calendar.
Is E3 too early though? Because like loads of people after it were saying just scrap E3. Because like if as a consumer show, right, it should be closer to Christmas. So like the whole point of it back in the day is exactly what the format is exactly what you said. Like it was set up because the media had to see things in a certain way. But like the origin of the show was so that retail buyers could buy games or see what they were buying for Christmas. Like that's where it came from in the first instance. So that the US retail knew what boxes they were going to be putting in their store for Thanksgiving. But like, it's just becoming increasingly irrelevant.
You've only got to look at a publisher as savvy as Rockstar. They don't go anywhere near it.
Exactly, and they haven't done for a few years.
They don't even put a trailer there. The last thing I think they had was the Agent logo. God bless Agent, wherever that is. The Sony press conference, which I think Sony must have drawn beforehand. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, there you go. That was E3. We hanged out. Look at that.
That was quite enjoyable, actually. Thanks for listening, anyone who's listening now.
There are 3 people watching at this point.
Yeah.
I think Matt from GamesIndustry.biz was watching at one point.
And he thought he'd had enough of it.
You get an insight into the working environments of us 3 as well.
There you go.
Pat printer.
I've got actual people in the background.
You got a bloke there. Who's that?
That's Steve.
Alright, Steve.
He can't hear you.
Right. Alright, good. We can do that again, maybe.
We should do this again sometime.
I thought that was really good fun.
I enjoyed it. And I'll stop broadcasting now.